Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Omar Khalid, but today is the 9th of November 2022 and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We will begin with, of course, the visit of our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to COP27, his address to COP27, the importance that is related and of course attached to COP27, how important it is for countries like Pakistan and other developing countries, and those even the developed countries that could be or would be or maybe in the future could be heavily impacted by climate change and the effects of climate change, like Pakistan has been this year, to for all the countries that are participating in COP27 to take a joint initiative in order to help those who are in need, like Pakistan, through climate justice, through different formalities that are being discussed during the course of COP27, or also to evolve a joint mechanism for all future calamities that could hit the world under climate change. Also carbon emission that needs to be curtailed and controlled. Let's see how the COP27 goes. Our Premier is back. Nevertheless, our Foreign Minister is still there. This is going to be our first segment, the importance of COP27, how the world leaders have discussed the actions to tackle climate change at this very important summit, and this is a summit that is still going on. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the UNHCR that is undertaking the 41st session of the Universal Periodic Review about India on the 10th of November, that is tomorrow. Of course, this event of the Universal Periodic Review is taking place in Geneva, and this is going to be conducted by Nepal, Sudan and Netherlands under the United Nations Human Rights Council. We all know what India has been perpetrating as human rights abuses. Not since now, not since the last few months, but since the last few decades, and all of the different modalities through which the people in India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir cannot even say anything that is the truth. Everything is controlled, and whenever somebody tries to say the truth, his voice is muted or curtailed, or the person is put into jail, or other atrocities that happen to such people. The Kashmiri leaders are incarcerated or are put into jails or under house arrest, and this list goes on and on. We will be discussing this in detail during the course of our second segment. We will also be including a little bit about Junagadh, because today is the Junagadh day as well. Let's start with our first segment, and that concerns COP27 and of course Pakistan's role as far as this very important moot is concerned, and how the COP27 could evolve a strategy that could be the beginning for all the countries that are impacted by climate change to heave a sigh of relief. More in the following report.
The UN's Climate Change Summit opened in Egypt for 2-week talks where nations are figuring out how to avert the worst of climate change. World leaders and diplomats framed the fight against global warming as a battle for human survival during opening speeches at COP27 Climate Summit in Egypt, with the head of the United Nations declaring a lack of progress so far had the world speeding down a highway to hell. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged nations to accelerate transition from fossil fuels and speed funding to poorer countries struggling under climate impacts that have already occurred, while warning that humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. Speaking at the COP27 climate conference alongside United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif stated that Pakistan would need debt relief and would seek compensation for climate damage as it recovers catastrophic floods that cost the country some $30 billion. Despite decades of climate talks, countries have failed to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, and their pledges to do so in future are insufficient to keep the climate from warming to a level scientists say will be catastrophic. Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing, global temperatures keep rising, and our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible, so it's high time to implement climate pledges.
It's high time to implement the climate pledges. Dr. Malka Saba, who is the assistant professor at the Qadi-e-Azam University, also former research fellow at Harvard University, joins us online. Dr. Saba, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saba, did the Climate Implementation Summit, our Prime Minister's talks, his interactions with the different important leaders, have any impact on COP27 and Pakistan's case?
Yes, certainly, because Prime Minister of Pakistan presented our nation very well, and he emphasized on the current result which we have as a result of this climate change, as a result of global warming which we are facing, like floods in Sindh and Balochistan. He emphasized on these issues, as well as he also emphasized on the climate finance, because they are demanding the funds from the developing countries to the climate vulnerable country to maintain their issues. And of course, I think the president communicated very well about the country's issues, and this issue is not on the nation. This is like the global issue, and we have to work on this issue jointly as well as ambitiously. Otherwise, we will suffer very drastically in future. And I'm very hopeful that this COP27 will bring like fruitful changes in controlling this climate change.
Dr. Malka, when it comes to Pakistan, we have all seen the fiscal or the economic impact that the floods because of climate change, of which Pakistan is not a country that imparts as much carbon emission as the other countries do. Nevertheless, it has been a victim of climate change. Do you feel the countries have understood that? The countries have also understood the fiscal impact of climate change on countries such as Pakistan or other countries that could be engulfed by effects of climate change in the future?
I think at this time they should understand the fiscal change which we are encountering, because due to this fiscal change, we will have more drastic impacts in future. And this is not only confined to the floods, we may have the other catastrophes as well. Like these greenhouse gas emissions can lead to the wildfires, can lead to other drastic changes if we have a carbon emissions, this is like polluting. This will lead to the smoke, and this can cause other diseases like smoke. This can cause asthma and is breathing issues we are having. And at this time we should like stand. We should take stand to bring into account this burning issue of climate change, and we should for the sustainable future of our future generations. And if we have not recognized yet, which I think so, we have not recognized yet, but we should do something on it, not only at the national level, but also internationally and also individually as well. We have to participate to cut it down.
All right, Dr. Malka, the fact remains that climate change is a reality that many countries did not accept beforehand. But now that Pakistan is a living and breathing example of how climate change can affect countries, those that even do not emit enough carbon, but are of course a victim of circumstances because of climate change. And the being a victim is a very small word. I mean, the amount of damage that Pakistan has seen, has gone through, is unprecedented in Pakistan's history as well. What do you feel are the chances to forge a common consensus on the way to move forward under these whole circumstances of climate change ruining countries' economy? Do you feel the countries will reach a consensus, especially the Western countries? We all remember, that is why I'm asking you, because in COP26 they made a lot of pledges, but those were not really translated into actions. 1 year has passed by, COP27 is on us, it is happening as we speak. Do you feel this time people will be more serious?
I think they should be, because if they are not serious, it is not a national challenge, it is an international challenge, and it is a global challenge, and we have to make an agreement at this time. Otherwise, like, we will suffer drastically in future. They have to be serious, and I have seen the presentations given by different prime ministers, and they were like very serious about this issue. And the United Nations Secretary, he was has given a very detailed account of this global change. I think they are serious.
Dr. Malka, Pakistan was quite active as far as the first 2 days of COP27 are concerned. Our Prime Minister, who was accompanied by other ministers as well, he co-chaired with the Norwegian Prime Minister a high-level roundtable discussion on climate change and the sustainability of vulnerable communities. He attended the Middle East Green Summit that was hosted by the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia. He participated in a high-level breakfast event on scaling up action and support on losses and damages. Then he also delivered a national statement at the summit. He robustly put across Pakistan's point of view. Did Pakistan's climate diplomacy work?
I think it will work because it is a global issue, and they emphasized on the climate finance as well, because and they talked about the loss and damage fund as well, and he demanded about the $30 billion to compensate the current scenario of the flood in Pakistan. I think the diplomacy will work. This will work.
All right. Now, let's move a little bit towards what the Prime Minister had to say. He told about the 33 million people that have been impacted. He talked about the 30 billion US dollars of damage that Pakistan has undergone because of these floods, because of climate change. And he also told that the flood hit Pakistan had to import wheat, palm oil, very expensive oil and gas, spending around $32 billion. He said that the country had also redirected its resources to meet the basic needs of the millions of flood affected households. I'm trying to put some of his points across because I want to understand why two UN pledges that were first of $160 million, the other of $816 million, were not did not go through as planned by the United Nations. Are the countries a bit reluctant to help Pakistan, or are there other geoeconomic or geostrategic issues that engulf the world?
I think they have made the certain agreements on net zero, like net zero emission of this issue. I think they will contribute well this time towards Pakistan, and they will contribute in relieving the Pakistan from these drastic issues. I think the Prime Minister presented the Pakistan very well, and they have not given like any statement which will not be in our favor, and I think this will work very well.
All right. Finally, Dr. Malka, Saba, latest UNESCO report found that glaciers in a third of the United Nations World Heritage Sites are going to melt within 3 decades. So, if the world does not act now, then this time Pakistan was affected, but other times other countries will be affected. GLOF is a phenomenon that could affect Pakistan also, as well as other countries that have a lot of glaciers. What needs to be the priorities as far as the world community is concerned during COP27, in your point of view?
I think the main cause of this global warming is the emission of these greenhouse gases. We should cut down the emission of these greenhouse gases, and this we can do by implementing certain rules. And the main thing which is causing the emission of the greenhouse gases is, I think, the burning of the fossil fuels. And they were emphasizing on trying to find out some renewable energy resources to get an alternate against these fossil fuels. And another thing is that we have to slow down, or we have to cut down the process of deforestation. And the main cause behind is population pressure, because due to the population pressure, our demands, they are increasing, and we are doing the deforestation, and we are installing more industries, and we are burning more fossil fuels to fulfill the demands of the increasing population. And due to these issues, so the main thing which we need to cut down is the emission of the greenhouse gases, which we can do by controlling the deforestation, as well as by controlling or by finding the renewable energy resources. Because the fossil fuel burning, they are emitting the carbon dioxide, which is the main greenhouse gas. Otherwise, that greenhouse effect is the main thing which makes survival on this planet possible, because we need a certain temperature to survive on Earth. If the temperature is increasing, this is due to the human activities. So we need the greenhouse effect, but the artificial greenhouse effect, which is due to the human activities, this is actually increasing the global warming and leading to the climate change. And this will lead to the melting of the glaciers at the Antarctica. And these melting glaciers will ultimately lead to the rise in the sea level, and which will lead to the flooding and all these things. And this is not the national challenge, this is the global challenge. Of course, this time we have faced this issue, and the next time will be the other countries which will face
that
this.
That is so true. So the world needs to be more cognizant and realizing what needs to be done. Thank you so very much, Dr. Malka Saba, Assistant Professor, Qaid-e-Azam University, also former research fellow, Harvard University, to have joined us, to have talked to us about COP27, the importance of this mood, and of course Pakistan's contribution as far as highlighting the issues that plague the world, including Pakistan, because of the effects of climate change. I'd end this segment with a quote from our Premier when he addressed the COP27. He said, "We have to fight and rebuild a resilient and adaptive infrastructure which can only be done through additional funding, not loans and debt. But the gap is widening by the day. It is a duty of the global north to understand our plight." Let's hope that the global north understands our plight. This was our first segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second segment concerns the brutalities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Many reports have come up from the United Nations, from Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, Genocide Watch, and so on. And I mean, the list is endless. Pakistan has also submitted many reports with facts and figures as far as the brutalities, human rights abuses in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir that are happening not since now but since decades. The only demand of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is the right to self-determination, the right to plebiscite so that they can decide what they want to do, where they want to live, what they want to do with their lives. This either angers or puts India in such a state of fear that it has put 900,000 plus troops in the Indian held valley and is going through different mechanisms or modalities to install fear amongst the people of the Indian held valley. This said, the Kashmiri leaders or the Kashmiri youth are revolting. They are of course trying to do their level best, highlighting the issues of the Indian held valley. Also the journalists, whether they be Kashmiri or otherwise, are also highlighting, but India is also trying to usurp their voices, to mute their voices. We have all seen how they tried with Rana Ayub. We also have seen how they have done with other Kashmiri journalists who tried to highlight the issues that plague Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Also, we know that recently a Kashmiri photojournalist who received the Pulitzer Prize was not allowed to board the plane to go to claim her prize just because she is Kashmiri. So you know the list goes on and on. Now what is happening that the United Nations UNHCR is undertaking the 41st session of the Universal Periodic Review. This periodic review goes through what is happening in different regions. Now this periodic review concerning India is going to happen tomorrow, that is the 10th of November. This is going to take place in Geneva and of course is going to be conducted by Nepal, Sudan and Netherlands under the United Nations Human Rights Council. Now the United Nations Human Rights Council, if you remember well, has also taken out 2 reports in the past as far as the Indian brutalities in the Indian held valley of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are concerned. Now India, this has been the demand of a lot of Kashmiri leaders and Pakistan as well, that India needs to allow United Nations fact-finding missions to Indian occupied Kashmir to investigate the ongoing and the past human rights violations, stop criminalizing freedom of expression and ensure freedom of travel. But of course India is afraid of that. India does not want that, because if you let that happen, then the truth will prevail. If the truth prevails, what is going to happen? What's going to happen is that the realities will come to the forefront, and India will be highlighted for all the atrocities that it has been committing, and of course its image in the West that it has been talking about as being a pluralistic country, as being a country that is so that reveres in all of its races and its different religions, which is of course not the case. So we will be discussing this UNHCR's session of the Universal Periodic Review about India that is going to happen tomorrow in the whole context of the human rights abuses happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. More in the following report, then we'll return with our guest.
India's democratic decline is becoming evident as the country is gripped by grave human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings by police, torture, arbitrary arrest and detention, violence against minorities, unjustified arrests of prosecution of journalists, and censorship and blocking of internet. India's escalating repression of Kashmiris has rendered Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir as most dreaded prison of the world. India is one of the states to be reviewed by the UPR working group during its upcoming session taking place from 7th of November to 18th of November, which marks the beginning of a UPR 4th cycle. India's human rights record will be examined by UN Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review Working Group for the fourth time. Hindu nationalist BJP has fostered religious polarization since coming to power in 2014. Right-wing Hindu groups have launched attacks on minorities. Several Indian states have passed or are considering anti-conversion laws that challenge the constitutionally protected right to freedom of belief. In 2019, Indian government passed a citizenship law that undermined India's secular constitution by excluding Muslim immigrants from neighboring countries from naturalization. Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir remains world's most militarized zone, where Kashmiris are facing an unending ordeal of terror and trauma. Hence, United Nations must conclude its review in accordance with the information in the reports of independent human rights experts and Kashmiri freedom groups and expose Indian assault on fundamental human rights. Attacks on
Now, of course, this is a very important issue. This is an issue that we have been highlighting through our shows. In my very series, Newsroom, we've been highlighting the different aspects of the human rights abuses that have been happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir since decades. And it has only intensified since 2019, when the Articles 370 and 35A were abrogated. To talk about the human rights abuses on a global level, on a regional level, on the level of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and also on a very personal level, because my guest has been impacted by this on that very personal level, and that is why she has been highlighting the human rights abuses in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir since quite some time. Her name is Mushaal Hussein Mullick. She's a Kashmiri leader. Thank you very much, Mushaal, to have joined us.
Thank you.
Mushaal, the first, second, third, reviews. The next review, of course, is happening tomorrow. Took place in 2008, 2012, and then in 2017, respectively. Were you satisfied with the outcomes of those three reviews as far as the holding India accountable for the human rights violations are concerned? Do you feel this time things might work for the better as far as the people of this besieged valley is concerned?
Actually, this is the third, in 2017 was the third cycle of the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, in which they were assessing the human rights situation in all the member states around the world. And 250 recommendations were given to India from various member states. And unfortunately, only around 152, 153 were implemented. The rest, especially on torture, on disabilities, on disappearances, and various other human rights violations, where not just the minorities but the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir were the most vulnerable, being used as human shields, rape as a weapon of war, and thousands and thousands of people were arrested in various jails of India. And what did actually India do? Were they considering on ratifying the various treaties or the various draconian legislative rules that they passed through which they were giving immunity to the killers, to the human rights violators? So it's very difficult to say that any form of improvement happened, but yes, what we have seen is that in the various reviews or the meetings, the annual assessment reports that have come forward and the recommendations, and this is not just coming from the Indian state or coming only from the US State Department or the UN, various other human rights organizations from around the world have given their recommendations, and various member states have asked India very serious questions, doubting their credibility to stand
but
as
Mushaal, they can ask India all that they want, but India will never reveal the true facts. Do you feel the UPR working group normally asks the country on which it is making a report to also submit its own personal report? Should it really give any credence or credibility to the report that will be formulated or given by India?
Definitely not. I think the credibility factor is a big question mark when it comes to India, especially after 5th of August 2019, what they've done, and then passing various draconian laws like UPA and the anti-minority bills being passed within India, how they've been treating the minorities like Christians, forced conversions of Christians, attacks on Muslims and on the Dalit community. So it's a fascist RSS regime that's in power right now, and we have witnessed various massacres, especially during the span of 4 to 5 years during the UPR reviews taking place. We have not seen any improvement. In fact, we have seen the worst things happening, like colonial laws of sedation and other various laws which has become discredited or which have expired in the UK. And why are they still being implemented, those colonial laws of 1860? And they're violating not just the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also the Indian Constitution, be it of 1950 or be it 1978, and their own conventions. So this is whatever laws that you have of sedation and draconian laws, these are laws which have expired, but yet they are being implemented on Kashmiris. And what's more alarming is that the sedation laws that are being implemented on Kashmiri leadership, on Kashmiri people raising their voice for freedom, those laws are also nullified, are invalid according to the Indian Supreme Court. So what is the validity? So wherever you go, I mean, like whatever you search for, and so many countries asking, like Panama, Belgium, the US State Department report on the religious freedom, on the freedom of expression, and various other countries like Spain asking that, do you allow international human rights organizations to come and to work there when you form acts against them for any kind of ban on foreign NGOs to work over there. And coming to Kashmir, hardly nobody is allowed there. No, human rights organization or international observers.
You can't post any statement that gives any sentiment of reality of what is happening in the Hill Valley. The last review was in 2017. Since then, we've had the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A, and the whole situation has deteriorated since then. So much so that Dr. Gregory Stanton, who's the head of Genocide Watch, has said that India is at the brink of genocide.
Yes, it's the 8th stage of genocide.
Not only for the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but for the 200 million plus Muslims that are in India itself. Under such an alarming situation that is given by Dr. Stanton and so many others, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the UNHRC report itself that came there twice before, don't you feel it's high time for the world bodies to react in a more stringent manner, in a more effective manner?
Yes, we're already very late, because genocide, which is the highest crime in the world, and then it is a disputed territory where 4 Geneva Conventions have been violated quite blatantly, international law, universal human rights law, and then you talk about the humanitarian law, all of them have been violated, Geneva Conventions, UN resolutions, and we see whatever India is doing right now, it's not just ethnic cleansing or war crimes, it's genocide. And as you mentioned, Professor Stanton, this is the 8th stage of genocide, and he himself was the founder of the International Criminal Tribunals, which were ad hoc criminal tribunals, which were established by the United Nations under the leadership of Professor Stanton for Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And we have quite similar conditions taking place over here. And now over here, it's a completely unarmed and defenseless and a voiceless nation right now, combating the highest occupation with the worst form of violations. Every day you hear of a new definition of human rights violations. Sometimes it's like you're a human shield, sometimes it's about your colossal economic losses. Before they were just bulldozing homes of Kashmiris, but now they're burning the homes in villages. So they're totally destroying people, burning them inside their homes, snatching their property documents. It's not just economic loss, it's political loss.
And then they're changing the demography of the whole region as well,
50 lakh Indians have been granted domiciles of a disputed territory. The people of Azad Kashmir, every Pakistani who goes there as a tourist or visits is not allowed to buy land there, nor does any Pakistani have a right to vote over there, because the demography is being protected till the UN resolutions are not implemented. But here it's totally different. And now the recent development is even more alarming. How the PDP, Mehbooba Mufti and Farooq Abdullah have announced that they will boycott these elections. That means that now it will only be the BJP and the Indian new voters that have been enrolled, 50 lakh new Indian voters. And the next 1 or 2 years, this will be a mini India. And then if we conduct plebiscite, I think that will be a big, major loss over the dead bodies, over entire graveyard of Kashmiri people who are the heirs of that land. So this is completely unbelievable. No legal action has been taken, and and should be under the legal yardstick of economic and defense sanctions against India. And RSS is a terrorist organization, and its sister organization HSS, which is working globally and which is selling the narrative of RSS of Akhand Bharat to the world and attacking moderate Hindus, attacking Muslims, attacking Kashmiris all over the world. This terrorism is spreading, and what's even more shocking is that I don't know why the world has not imposed defense sanctions on India, because RSS for the past 13 years they have been researching and working on making their own atomic bombs, and they have been involved in almost 3 to 4 incidents of illegal sale of uranium.
And that
has been linked with RSS. And where are we heading as a global village? I fail to understand on what grounds it is still a member of the United Nations.
Human Rights Council is exactly. I understand all the the comments and the points that you are making, but another very important point is also the voices of the Kashmiris and the voices of the Kashmiri leaders. You've been affected personally. Your husband Yasin Mullick has been incarcerated, has been subject to abuse for so long. Why is the Human Rights Council, why are other human rights organizations not standing up to leaders such as Yasin Mullick and putting sanctions on India against what they have been perpetrating on people like your husband and other Kashmiri leaders?
Yes, we have witnessed Ghulam Muhammad Bhatt Sahab. He was assassinated in Tihar jail. Before that, Ashraf Sahrai Sahab was killed. He's a martyr. He was poisoned in Jammu jail. Before that, we lost the iconic leader Said Ali Gilani Sahab. So they're hell-bent upon completely eliminating the leadership of Kashmir, the right to self-determination, the face of the peaceful political struggle, and their main goal is to make the entire movement leaderless. And for that they can go to any extent, and what they've done with Yasin is you've not seen one example in history where even if the state is really cruel and wants to hang a leader or is against it, but they always get that right to say something in their defense, to defend themselves, or have a lawyer to advocate their case. But in Yasin's case, he was not allowed a lawyer, he was not allowed to come forward before the court and to speak up for his rights. And it was a unilateral decision by the Indian state. I would call it judicial terrorism. A man for 3.5 years was kept in a death cell. Illegally he was locked up through UPA, through TADA, these black laws, the face of the peaceful movement, how he was treated worse than a terrorist, and he's only produced physically in the courts when a decision is being announced against him. And when the judge said that, do you want any leniency, he said, I'm not going to beg for my life. And when the the life sentence, 2 life sentences in one lifetime and rigorous imprisonment, he's sent back to the death cell. And another court, the court has ordered that a production warrant that Yasin should be produced in Jammu. Even then, the Indian state has directly intervened through the Tihar authorities and said, no, he's not allowed, he's a terrorist. He has to be locked up. So this is, you don't expect any form of justice coming from the aggressors or the occupiers. Their only goal is to make this a majority Indian area, to saffronize it, to make it a mini Hindutva area, just like the RSS did when we recall the horrific Holocaust of 1947, 6th November. Over 5 to 6 lakh Jammu Muslims were beheaded, slaughtered, and till date no legal action has been taken against that genocide, and we are seeing history repeating itself now after 2019. What they are doing with Kashmiris, and I'm afraid if the world will not respond to it, it will not just be the loss of the Kashmiris or the people of Jammu. It will be the loss of the entire world, because because as I always say that the nuclear is in the hands of a terrorist right now, RSS. True. And they can go to any extent the way they did on 27 February 2019 when nuclear codes were exchanged. And now the RSS is ruling, and they already have an atomic bomb which they're working on, the RSS terrorists. So this is going to go global. This global terrorism machine needs to be stopped, needs to be held accountable under international jurisdictions.
And of course this Universal Periodic Review is a very important step in that direction, to highlight those those human rights abuses, to highlight those atrocities. Now, of course, the India delegation is going to be led by Mr. Tushar Mehta, who is a Solicitor General of India. Is there going to be a leadership, some Kashmiri leadership that will also be part of this whole review?
There's one organization, CARE, which is, contributed towards this, and a few other Kashmiris, but I'm not sure, because we're not part of the member states over there as yet. We've not been given the right to self-determination. But this is a very important step being taken to at least question India, especially after 5th of August, what it's done, and it should be held accountable. It should be, legal actions should be taken. International Criminal Tribunal is needed, and also from the International Court of Justice, and against the war crimes being committed by the Indian forces. They should be challenged in a similar manner as the Palestinians have taken the Israeli soldiers and gotten them punished and persecuted by the International Criminal Court. So that should be the way forward. And the second thing is to demand an urgent population census in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir after 5th of August
so 2019. That we can see what
there many legal actions can be taken, and demanding Kashmir envoy from the United Nations.
You talked about a question regarding the credibility of the Indian government and the way the Narendra Modi-led government is working. What I'd like to understand is, why is there a reluctance by the world community to highlight what is happening under the Narendra Modi-led BJP government? Why is the world, I've heard statements, the German foreign minister talked about it with our foreign minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab recently. We've had the US State Department also talk about it. But why aren't there more voices? Why isn't there a collective voice talking about these atrocities in the Hill Valley?
I think they're mostly concerned about their short-term economic goals with India, because I see India heading towards anarchy and a civil war very soon, because the seeds of extremism that have been propagated and been sown by the Indian state, they are so deep-rooted now, and you have a large chunk of minorities living over there, and then you have a lot of multinationals and foreigners, and this air of intolerance, I think, is definitely going to impact the future business of countries that have invested over there. And whenever I meet people from other countries, like diplomats, or in touch with politicians from around the world, especially from the Western world and the Arab world, I keep telling them that, whatever is happening, it's fully armed, equipped with swords, with weapons, the RSS, and the level of rape that takes place within India, and how they are, forcing Christians to convert, and they've been involved in Makkah bombings, Gujarat killings, and attacking churches. Do you expect in the next few years that foreigners will be safe there? Absolutely not. And the main goal of economic prosperity is stability, and I don't see stability coming in the near future within India. I see a lot of riots, religious terrorism taking place, extremism, and being sponsored by the state, and this spirit of this entire atmosphere of intolerance is literally going to tear India apart into pieces. And I think if the world is really interested in the big market, they should force India to return towards secularism and restore the freedom, or give the freedom and demilitarize Kashmir.
And let them decide what they want to do with their lives.
And give them that right. Otherwise, I see a very dark future for all the investors. It's short term, maybe for 5 years, but after 4 to 5 years, I see a full-fledged civil war going on.
All right. What about the reaction from the Kashmiri leaders? How are they coping with the current state of increased brutalities by the Indian government and the Indian forces? How are they holding up? How are the sane voices within the Kashmir Valley and outside Kashmir also holding up and trying to voice as much of their concern as possible?
I was just reading recently, like a Kashmiri truck driver was brutally beaten up by some people in Punjab when the truck was stopped. And then just yesterday, another video came from Delhi University, where Kashmiri girls and boys were having an argument with some RSS mindset students. So they were beating them up. So this is a complete normalcy over there for the state, and how they have used this propaganda machine of movies, of theatre, of propaganda, visuals, especially Kashmir Files, to discredit and to change the social fabric of Kashmir Kashmir by creating a religious anarchy over there between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. And that false propaganda, I mean, whosoever has studied the Kashmir issue and has a keen eye to look at the history, especially of the early 90s, it was Jagmohan who was responsible for the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits at that time, who was from BJP, the governor, and it had nothing to do with the Kashmiri leadership. The leadership, we've been blessed to have a very strong, very committed, extremely brave, and very realistic, and with an approach which should be acceptable by the world, because this is a very legitimate demand, right to self-determination. And India has used all sorts of pressures to not just to silence or to bribe the leadership or to torture them or to harass them, but they've always been unsuccessful in breaking the will of the leadership. And our leadership is united, but the problem is that they're eliminating the entire leadership. But the freedom, the spirit of freedom is in every Kashmiri, and that is not going to die down till the last Kashmiri lives. But they're unarmed, they're coffin clad. I mean, how long? It's not humanly possible to keep on combating such a well-equipped army, which is over 9 lakhs, and with so much of immunity and protection. And even and now the new plan of India is to that they've sidelined the Hurriyat, the top leadership, they've eliminated them. So all democratic, peaceful voices have been eliminated. So all I see is that India wants to, not just silence the political voices, but it is not ready for any peaceful solution. So that is the main question mark. So does India want the entire Kashmiri public to pick up arms or to use violence as a method? Because it's 99.9%, it's a peaceful democratic movement where you have a lot of Kashmiri Pandits along with Kashmiri Muslims, though it's a Kashmiri majority Muslim area, and you see a lot of religious harmony over there amongst the Buddhists, and it is trying to by the conversion of the Union Territory and delimitation and other ways of taking away all the political, religious and economic rights, but they have not been able to break the will of the people. And that is, I think, the silver lining, that they have not been, they've tried every method, but the only humanly possible method right now to save Kashmiris from becoming extinct is to put India under international universal law.
Let's hope really, Mushaal Mullick, that this review paves the way for the Kashmiris to get their right to self-determination. But it's just not a question of Kashmir. I understand the Kashmir is the major issue. There's also Junagadh, that is a territory of Pakistan since 15 September 1947. But still then, it is not, Pakistan is not being given access. India is illegally holding both the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Junagadh. Now, in your point of view, how can the international community, which includes the United Nations, could play an effective role? You talked about, just now you were talking about the importance of the role that these international communities can play, the international organizations can play. Can they also liberate Junagadh from the Indian illegal occupation, in your point of view?
Of course, this forcible occupation by India after partition of Junagadh, which was ruled by a Muslim ruler, and it is a complete blatant violation of international law, of UN resolutions, and I think Pakistan should take this case internationally. 50 years will be given to bilateralism, and yes, it is a black day because this is the day when the Indian occupational forces landed there and took away their democratic right to self-determination to determine their future, when they had already decided that they wanted to be with Pakistan. I think this case has not been internationalized the way it should have been, and now the policies should be revamped to take the case of Kashmir and Junagadh together to international platforms and to expose India's nefarious designs.
Let's hope, let's stay optimistic, let's pray that the world listens to our plight, that the world listens to the plight of all the Kashmiris that are being incarcerated, raped, violated and killed and jailed, and of course being put under tremendous pressure and torture one way or the other in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Their lives have been turned around since generation. Let's hope through this forum we can at least highlight this to the international community, to all those who are listening in all the different countries across the world. Thank you very much, Mushaal, Hussein, Mullick, to have joined us, to have come all the way to the studios to highlight this very, very important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, this review is happening tomorrow on India. We will be, of course, continue to cover it.